Okay, so I saw a couple of questions and comments from you guys about how long it's going to take for someone using naltrexone following the Sinclair method to start to experience that off switch, which I described in a video, which is where this comment came from, where I used to be a binge drinker, didn't have control, and then after I'd been on naltrexone for a while, it would prevent me from over drinking. After a couple of drinks, I would just be satisfied and I wouldn't want more than that. And so people want to know, well, how long does it take to get that experience on the medication? Because for most of us, it's not instant. So I wanted to respond to that. Just quick disclaimer, this is not medical advice. This is me just speaking from my own personal experience using naltrexone for 1 year. And I've also been a recovery coach in this space as well for 5 years. So generally speaking, everybody is different with how quickly they will respond to the treatment. For me personally, I started to notice the off switch intermittently. So sometimes it would be more obvious and I could stop, and other times I feel like I wouldn't notice it at all and I'd be like, oh my gosh, is the medication even working? And I've heard this same thing from clients as well. I would say for me, the first time that I noticed the off switch with naltrexone was probably within the first couple of weeks that I was taking the medication, where if I was paying attention, I could notice like, hey, I've had 3 or 4 drinks and I don't really want another one. And so the first time I started to get a glimpse into it, probably within the first few weeks I was on the treatment. This was back in 2017, so I can't say for certain, but that's roughly when I recall. Now, like I said, it didn't happen every single time, and I want to talk more about what I learned through, the times where I would notice that off switch and I feel like I would have more control versus the times where I felt like the medication wasn't really working. So I feel like the off switch with naltrexone was more obvious for me in certain settings, and it was also more obvious the longer I was on the medication treatment. I basically always had an off switch when I was about 7 or 8 months into the treatment, where I knew every single time that I drank following the protocol, I was not going to overdrink. I was going to drink moderately, and I'd be able to stop after 1, 2, maybe 3 drinks. So that took me roughly about 8 months to get to that point where I felt like I was at extinction, meaning I felt like I had totally regained my control over alcohol and I could trust myself 100% of the time that I was no longer going to be someone who overdrank. Again, emphasizing the fact that it took me 8 months to get to that point. Now, leading up to that, like I said, I would notice it sometimes more obviously and other times not. And the times where I would not notice it, typically it would be if I was in a social setting and I wasn't really being mindful with my drinking and I was just kind of like letting people refill my drinks. I was drinking quickly, wasn't really paying attention to how much I was drinking. That was one setting where I would often overdrink and not really feel like naltrexone was working as well. Of course, if I was drinking on an empty stomach, that was another thing. That was a habit I really had to break on this method, was, drinking alcohol without food in my stomach, because I did that a lot just to get the buzz more quickly. So if I did not eat, I could easily ignore the off switch with naltrexone. Another time that it was harder for me to notice it was when I was drinking when I was upset. So if I was drinking due to stress or sadness or frustration, it was really easy for me to even, I might notice it. Like I might feel like, I've had 3 drinks, I don't really feel like having more, but I could kind of ignore it. Kind of like how if we're full and we don't want to eat any more food, but we kind of keep eating anyway, maybe because we're emotional eating or something like that. So those were some instances where I feel like I didn't notice the off switch as obviously, or I could notice it and kind of ignore it. And I've seen that happen with a lot of clients as well, where, like for me, for example, I would really feel satisfied and be like, yeah, I don't really feel like having another drink, but maybe I still had half the bottle of wine left and my habit was to finish the whole bottle, and so I would continue drinking anyway and kind of ignore that off switch. And this is really common on the Sinclair method, and it's honestly why we have our program at Thrive, to really help people with the habit change piece, creating new coping tools, and creating a life that just revolves less around alcohol so that we can achieve whatever our ideal relationship with alcohol is. And within the Sinclair Method community, the phenomenon of kind of noticing the off switch and kind of drinking past it is called drinking through the naltrexone, where in my experience, like I said, I could be like, yeah, I don't really feel like having any more alcohol, but I would keep drinking anyway because I was drinking to kind of get drunk or numb out, or my habits were at play. And like I said, it's Friday night, or I was used to drinking a full bottle of wine, so I would just kind of ignore that off switch and keep drinking like I had for the past 10 years. And I will say, I think for most of us, it's a process of learning to discern that off switch and start to listen to it, because in my experience, the longer I was on naltrexone, the more obvious the off switch was. It was not something that was super obvious in the beginning. It wasn't always obvious, but the more consistently I took the medicine and drank on it, I feel like the off switch got more and more obvious. So I think in one instance, like, this treatment really needed time to work for me. And then in another, scenario, I really needed to learn to notice that off switch, and not only notice it, but pay attention to it. Because like I said, there would be times I would notice it, but I would kind of ignore it. So I had to learn to notice it and respond and be like, okay, I don't really feel like having a third or fourth drink. So what else can I do? Can I have a cup of tea, or can I go take a shower? Can I take a break? Can I have a snack? Again, this is kind of the behavior habit change piece that for me and for most of us goes along with taking the medicine. And again, this is why we created our program, to help people with that side of it. And again, just to reemphasize, it took me around 8 months roughly to get to a place where I was having the off switch 100% of the time, and feeling like I had, total trust in myself with alcohol again, and total control over my alcohol. So just to summarize, for me, again, it took me time to get to a place where I had a consistent off switch. Some days I would notice it, some days I wouldn't, some days I would notice it and I would ignore it. It took me, maybe the first few weeks on the treatment was about the time when I first started to notice that off switch. But again, it wasn't consistent. And I think I'm a broken record in my videos with kind of reminding people that this treatment really needs time to work for most of us. Like I said, I've been a coach in this field for about 5 years. And the fastest I've seen someone respond to this medicine and get to the point of extinction through this treatment was about 3 months. And it's pretty rare to see that. For most of us, I would say I was an average case, so about 8 to 9 months. Others, it can take longer. We have people in our program, they've been on the treatment for over a year, and they've reduced their drinking in significant ways, but they're still not exactly where they want to be yet. And in my experience, what I found is that the longer I took naltrexone and the more repetition I had with taking it and drinking on it following the Sinclair Method, the more and more it worked. It just kept working better and better and better the longer I was on the protocol. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you for watching. As always, if you have more questions, drop them below. Can't get to all of them, but I'll do my best to answer the ones that I think are the most common questions. And if you want more support, coaching support on the Sinclair Method, that's why we created our entire program. It's private, everything's online. You have access to so many different resources, support tools, coaching support, peer support, and you have access for as long as you need, both from your computer and your mobile device. Learn more about that with the link in my profile, and talk to you guys again later. Bye.